My name is Vivian Claire Holloway. I am 36 years old. And on the evening of Saturday, March 9, 2024, I stood at the entrance of the Grand Meridian Ballroom on the 14th floor of the Ashford Tower Hotel in downtown Chicago, Illinois, while the woman who handed me to strangers when I was 7 years old sat at table 1, holding a champagne glass, wearing a diamond necklace I had never seen before. He did not see me at first. The room was full, 412 guests according to the event program I was holding. The Illinois Business Leadership Awards Gala. The most prestigious corporate recognition event in the Midwest. I was not a guest. I was the keynote speaker. My name was printed on the front of every program in that room. Vivian Claire Holloway. Chief Executive Officer. Holloway & Associates LLC. Revenue, $47 million annually. Named one of Forbes' 50 most influential women in business, 2023. She saw my name before she saw my face. I watched it happen from 20 feet away. She picked up the program from the table. She read the cover. Her champagne glass tilted slightly in her fingers. Then she looked up, and her eyes found me across the room. For 3 full seconds neither of us moved. Then the event coordinator touched my elbow and said, "Ms. Holloway, we're ready for you." I straightened my jacket. I walked to the podium. And the room applauded for the woman that the little girl she abandoned had become. But let me take you back to where this all began. Visual. Slow fade to a rain-soaked street. A small house with peeling yellow paint. A child's red suitcase on a front porch. A car driving away in the rain. Visual. A modest neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. Autumn leaves on cracked sidewalks. A school bus stopping in front of a small house. 1994. It was October 14, 1994. I was 7 years old. We lived at 2218 Birchwood Lane, Columbus, Ohio. A 2-bedroom house that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. My mother's name was Renee Holloway. She was 29 years old and she was, in her own words, done. Done with Columbus. Done with the house. Done with me. I know that sounds harsh. I spent years trying to find softer words for it. I told myself she was struggling, that she was sick, that she didn't understand what she was doing. And maybe some of that was true. But the truth I had to face eventually, the truth I spent 30 years circling before I could say it out loud, is that on October 14, 1994, my mother packed one bag for herself, put a red suitcase on the front porch with my name written on a piece of masking tape, and drove away in a gray Toyota Corolla without looking back. I was standing at the living room window. I watched her go. She didn't wave. She didn't stop. She just turned left at the end of Birchwood Lane and disappeared. Visual. Close-up of a child's hand pressing against foggy glass. I don't remember crying immediately. I remember the silence. How enormous and wrong it felt. How the house, which was never particularly warm, became something different in that silence. Like a place that had already forgotten I was there. My father, Douglas Holloway, had left 2 years before that. He moved to Portland, Oregon with a woman named Carla. He sent a birthday card once, my 6th birthday, with a $20 bill inside and no return address. That was the last time I heard from him until I was 24 years old. I found out later, much later, that before she left, my mother had called her older sister, my Aunt Patricia, who lived in Dayton, Ohio. She told Patricia that she was going through some things, and that I would be at the house. That someone needed to come. Patricia drove to Columbus that same evening. She found me sitting on the front porch next to my red suitcase. It was 41 degrees outside. I had been sitting there for 4 hours. Visual. A woman's headlights pulling up to a dark house. A child in a coat very still on the steps. Patricia Reed was 34 years old. She was a high school history teacher. She drove a blue Subaru. She had a husband named Gerald and a son named Marcus who was 9. She lived in a house on Maple Creek Road that had a porch swing and a garden that she tended on Sunday mornings. She was not prepared for me. But she came anyway. She wrapped her coat around my shoulders on that porch, looked at me for a long moment and said, very quietly, "You're coming home with me, okay?" I nodded. I picked up my suitcase myself. I didn't ask where my mother was. I think at 7 years old, some part of me already knew that asking that question would not produce an answer that helped. What I did not know, what Patricia had not yet told me and would not tell me until I was 20 years old, was that before she drove to Columbus that night she had a phone call. Not with my mother. With a lawyer. I kept that fact somewhere in the back of my mind for 13 years. Not as a mystery. Just as a quiet, unresolved thing. The kind of thing a child carries without fully understanding its weight. Visual. A blue Subaru driving through evening light. The back seat. A small girl with a suitcase on her lap, staring out the window at a city disappearing behind her. I moved into Patricia and Gerald's house in Dayton on October 14, 1994. Marcus gave me his second bedroom without being asked. Gerald made pancakes the next morning. Patricia sat across from me at the breakfast table and said, "You can stay as long as you need to." I stayed for 11 years. Visual. A cheerful kitchen. Morning light. A round table. School backpacks by the door. A woman pouring orange juice. The quiet normalcy of a home that functions. Life on Maple Creek Road was not perfect. But it was real. Gerald worked as a plant supervisor at a manufacturing facility in Miamisburg. He left at 6:15 every morning and came home at 5:45. He didn't say much, but he fixed things. If a door hinge was loose, he tightened it. If I needed help with a school project, he sat at the table with me and did not leave until it was done. He called me by my full name, Vivian. Not Viv, not sweetie, not anything that implied I was temporary. Just Vivian. Like I was real. Marcus treated me like an annoying little sister from the very first week. He teased me about my handwriting and once hid my favorite book on the top shelf in the garage just to watch me climb for it. I chased him around the backyard and called him insufferable, which was a word I'd learned from a library book. He laughed so hard he fell off the porch steps. That was the first time I laughed after my mother left. I remember it precisely because I felt guilty about it immediately. Like I was not allowed to laugh yet. Visual. A backyard. 2 children running. Autumn leaves. A woman watching from the kitchen window, smiling quietly. Patricia was the one I studied the most carefully. She was a small, deliberate woman. Measured in her movements. She did not give compliments easily, but when she gave them, they meant something. She graded papers at the kitchen table on Tuesday evenings. She kept a calendar on the refrigerator where she wrote every single appointment in blue ink. She made her bed every morning before she did anything else. She was the most organized person I had ever met. And she taught me, not with lectures but by example, that discipline was a form of self-respect. I watched her and I took notes. Not literally. But I catalogued every habit, every system, every routine she had. I told myself, if I ever feel like I am falling apart, I will do what Patricia does. I will make the bed. I will write things down. I will show up on time. I will not let the chaos outside become chaos inside. That lesson saved my life. More than once. School was complicated. The first year I was quiet and strange and kids noticed. My teacher at Madison Elementary, a woman named Mrs. DuPont, once told the class that Vivian is joining us from Columbus and she is adjusting. He meant well. But the way she said it, the careful, apologetic tone, made every child turn and look at me like I was a problem to be managed. I hated that. I decided very young that I would not be someone people needed to manage. By 4th grade I had the highest reading score in my class. By 5th grade I was tutoring other students in math after school in the school library, room 12 Tuesdays and Thursdays, 3:15 to 4:30. In 6th grade a boy named David Keene told me that kids like me, the ones without real parents, usually ended up working at the gas station on Route 35. I did not respond. I wrote it down in the back of my notebook, tore the page out and kept it in my red suitcase. Not out of bitterness. Out of purpose. Visual. A girl at a library desk, alone, books stacked neatly in front of her. Pencil moving across paper. The focused, quiet intensity of someone building something no one else can see yet. The red suitcase. I need to tell you about the red suitcase. It was cheap. Bright red with a broken zipper on one side that Patricia fixed with a safety pin. My name was still on it in masking tape. Vivian, in my mother's handwriting. I never removed that tape. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because it was the last thing she ever wrote for me, even if the act of writing it was itself an act of leaving. Inside the suitcase I kept 3 things over the years. The birthday card from my father. The one with the $20 bill. A photograph of my mother and me on my 5th birthday. She is holding a chocolate cupcake. I am sitting on her lap. She is actually smiling in it. A real smile, not a performance, and her hand is around my back and she looks happy. And the 3rd thing, an envelope. Patricia had pressed it into my coat pocket on the night she found me on the porch. I didn't know what was in it. She didn't explain. She just said quietly while she wrapped her coat around me, "You hold on to this." I tried to open it twice as a child. Both times I stopped. Something told me I wasn't ready. I didn't open it until I was 20 years old. What was inside that envelope changed the entire story of my life. But we'll come back to that. Visual, a high school hallway. Lockers. A girl walking quickly, books under her arm, earbuds in. Not unfriendly. Just focused. She has somewhere to be. Dayton Jefferson High School. I started there in September 1999. I was 12, having skipped a grade. Patricia had fought for that quietly in 3 different meetings with the school board. She had brought my test scores, my project reports, my tutoring records. She sat across from administrators in a conference room and laid evidence on the table like a lawyer making a case, except she was just a high school teacher who believed in me. They approved the advancement. I don't think I ever fully thanked her for that. High school changed something in me. I found language for what I wanted to become. I sat in a business elective class in 10th grade taught by a man named Mr. Theodore Graves, who was 51, wore the same 3 ties in rotation, and spoke about market strategy with the kind of passion most people reserved for religion. He noticed me in the 3rd week. Not because I raised my hand. I rarely raised my hand. But because after class one day I came to his desk and told him his pricing model example had an error in it. I showed him the math. He looked at the paper for a long moment. Then he said, "Who taught you this?" "I read it," I said. He stared at me the way a person stares when they realize something they weren't expecting. "Come back at 3 o'clock, he said. "I want to talk to you." That afternoon in room 214 of Dayton Jefferson High School, Theodore Graves told me that I had a mind for business. That he had been teaching for 23 years and he had seen perhaps 3 students who thought the way I did. That I should apply to Ohio State's business program. That there were scholarships. That he would write me a letter. I sat across from him in a plastic chair and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not managed. Not adjusted for. Not explained to the class. "You'll go further than you think, Vivian," he said. I added that to the notebook. Visual, a classroom at golden hour. A man at his desk. A girl across from him. 2 people who recognize something important in the moment they are living. By my junior year I had a 4.0 GPA. I worked part-time at a dry cleaning shop on Salem Avenue, $7 an hour, 12 hours a week. I saved $4,200 by graduation. In April of my senior year, I received an acceptance letter from the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business with a merit scholarship of $18,500 per year. I brought the letter home and put it on the kitchen table. Patricia read it 3 times. Then she looked up and said, "I knew it." 2 words. But the way she said them, not surprised, just confirmed, made me feel like she had been holding that belief for 11 years and had simply been waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Gerald framed the letter. It hung in the kitchen on Maple Creek Road for the next 9 years. Visual, a framed letter on a wall. Morning sun catching its edge. Before I go any further, if you have ever had someone in your life who showed up for you when your own family didn't, if you know what it means to be raised by someone who chose you instead of someone who was supposed to keep you, drop the word chosen in the comments below. I want to see how many of you carry that story. And if this is hitting something real, subscribe to Orphan Origins because we are only just beginning. The most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Visual, a college dorm room. Night. A desk lamp. Textbooks. And a girl on the floor, cross-legged, holding an old red suitcase on her lap. I was 20 years old when I finally opened the envelope. It was November 7, 2007. I was in my sophomore year at Ohio State. It was a Wednesday night. I had just finished a finance exam which I had been awake studying for since 4 a.m. the previous day, and I was sitting on the floor of my dorm room in Baker Hall, and I reached under my bed for the red suitcase the way I sometimes did when I felt very tired. Not to look at anything. Just to feel it. But that night I opened it. I took out the birthday card. The photograph. And then I took out the envelope. It was sealed still. 13 years and I had never broken that seal. My name was not written on the front. Nothing was written on the front. I opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a business card. The paper was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, different from my mother's. It was from a man named Robert Harlan, SQ attorney at law. Harlan and Whitfield, LP. 1840 Riverside Drive, Suite 7, Columbus, Ohio. The letter was dated October 13, 1994. One day before my mother left. Visual, a close-up of a letter. Formal language. A notary seal at the bottom. I read it very slowly. It said, in formal legal language, that a trust account had been established in the name of Vivian Claire Holloway. That the trust had been funded by a single deposit of $210,000. That the trust would remain sealed and inaccessible until the beneficiary, meaning me, reached the age of 25. That the trust had been established not by my mother, but by my maternal grandmother, Eleanor Marie Holloway, who had died on September 29, 1994. 15 days before my mother left. I sat on the floor of my dorm room and I read that letter 4 times. Then I put everything back in the suitcase. Then I sat very still for a long time. Because here is what I understood at 20 years old, sitting on a dormitory floor with a finance exam on my desk and a 13-year-old letter in my hands. My grandmother had left me money. And my mother had known about it. And she had left me anyway. Not just that, she had left me with the envelope. She had put it in Patricia's hands and said in effect, "Here is proof. Here is what I am choosing to abandon." I did not sleep that night. I called Patricia at 7:15 the next morning. She picked up on the first ring. I opened the envelope, I said. A long pause. "I know," she said. "Did you read it?" Another pause. Then, "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," she said carefully, "it wasn't mine to tell. And because you needed to be old enough to know what it meant." I sat with that answer for a long time. I still think about it. I still don't know if she was right. But I kept the letter. I kept the business card. And I made a quiet decision that morning on the phone with Patricia Reed, standing in a Baker Hall hallway with students walking past me on both sides. I would wait. I would build. And when I turned 25, I would go to 1840 Riverside Drive, Suite 7, Columbus, Ohio. And I would find out exactly what my grandmother had left me, and why. Visual, a college campus in winter. Early mornings. Library lights. A young woman moving fast through a campus, always carrying something, always going somewhere. I graduated from Ohio State Fisher College of Business in May 2009. Summa cum laude. GPA 3.97. I had a job offer before graduation, an associate analyst position at Meridian Capital Partners, a mid-sized investment consulting firm on the 12th floor of the Huntington Center in Columbus. Starting salary, $58,000 per year. I moved into a studio apartment on Grant Avenue, Columbus. 340 square feet. 2 windows facing a brick wall. A kitchen that was technically also part of the living room. I bought a second-hand desk from a thrift store on Broad Street for $42. I put it by one of the windows. I made coffee every morning at 5:45 a.m. and read industry reports before I went to work. I was 22 years old. I was completely, entirely alone. Visual, a studio apartment. A lone desk lamp. A small figure at a window. City lights below. A life being built from scratch. Here is the thing about building yourself without a safety net. It is not just hard. It is quiet in a way that accumulates. At Meridian, I was the youngest person on the team and the only one who did not come from money. My colleagues had gone to Northwestern and Dartmouth. They talked about ski houses and family connections in the same tone other people used to talk about weather. They were not cruel to me. They simply did not see me the same way they saw each other. I used that. I worked longer. I read more. I found the gaps in every analysis my superiors did not catch. I never made a mistake twice. Within 18 months, I was managing 3 client portfolios that previously belonged to senior associates. My manager, a man named Howard Pfeiffer, pulled me into a conference room in February 2011 and told me I was being promoted to senior analyst. He said, "You're the best hire we've made in a decade, Vivian." I said, "Thank you." I did not tell him that on the night I got that job offer, I had stood in Patricia's kitchen in Dayton. I had driven back for the weekend, and cried at the table while she made tea, not because I was happy but because no one in my family would ever know. That there was no one to call. No parent to drive to Columbus and take me to dinner. No one to say you did it. Patricia said, "I know." She sat across from me and put her hand on the table. "I know," she said again. "And I'm so proud of you." It was the closest thing to a mother's voice I had heard in 15 years. I drove back to Columbus the next morning. Visual: an empty car on a highway at dawn. Farmland. The slow-rolling flat landscape of Ohio. A woman driving alone. In 2012, I left Meridian Capital and co-founded my own consulting firm. I was 25 years old. I had $47,000 in savings. I had a business plan I had been writing for 2 years. I had a client list of 11 small and mid-sized businesses who had told me, quietly in hallways and after meetings, that they trusted my judgment more than anyone at Meridian. I rented a 2-room office on the 6th floor of the Commerce Building on South High Street, Columbus. I put my name on the glass door. Holloway and Associates, LC. I stood outside that door the first morning and took a photograph on my phone. I sent it to 2 people. Theodore Graves. And Patricia Reed. Visual: a glass office door. A name etched on it. Morning light hitting the letters. That same week I turned 25. And I called the number on the business card that had been sitting in a red suitcase for 18 years. Robert Harlan answered on the 3rd ring. I told him my name. There was a pause. Then he said, "I've been waiting for your call, Miss Holloway." 3 days later, I sat in a leather chair across from Robert Harlan in Suite 7 at 1840 Riverside Drive. He was 71 years old. Silver hair. Glasses. Careful hands that set a manila folder on the desk between us. He said, "Your grandmother, Eleanor Holloway, passed away on September 29, 1994. She left a will. The primary beneficiary of her estate was her daughter, Renee, your mother. However, your grandmother was very specific about one thing." He opened the folder. "She knew your mother was struggling. She was not certain Renee would handle the responsibility. So she set aside a separate trust, not part of the primary inheritance, specifically for you. It was established on October 11, 1994, 3 days before your mother left." He slid a document across the desk. "The trust matures to $341,000 including interest accrued since 1994. I looked at the number on the page. "She knew my mother was going to leave me," I said. Robert Harlan was quiet for a moment. "I believe your grandmother was trying to make sure that whatever your mother chose, you would be taken care of." I sat in that office on the 6th floor of a Columbus building on a gray February morning, and I understood something for the first time. My grandmother had loved me. From beyond whatever she knew was coming. She had planned for my life even while she was losing hers. I held that. I did not cry in Robert Harlan's office. I cried in my car. For 20 minutes in a parking garage on Riverside Drive, I sat behind the wheel and cried the way you cry when you realize that someone you never got to know had protected you. Then I wiped my face. And I went back to work. Visual: a modern office. Late evening. City lights through a floor-to-ceiling window. A woman at her desk, phone lighting up. By 2018, Holloway and Associates was generating $12.4 million in annual revenue. I had 14 employees. I had an office on the 23rd floor of the Burnham Building in Chicago, where I had relocated the company in 2016 for access to larger clients. I had been featured in Crane's Chicago Business Incorporated magazine, and the Chicago Tribune's Women Reshaping Chicago Commerce feature. I had a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the lake. And I was sitting at my desk on a Tuesday evening in October 2018, at 9:54 p.m., finishing a client acquisition report, when my phone rang. The number was a Columbus area code. 614. I had not had a Columbus number on my phone in years. I did not recognize it. I almost did not answer. I answered. "Is this Vivian Holloway?" A woman's voice. Older. A little breathless. "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" Pause. "This is Sandra. Sandra Bauer. I was your mother's neighbor. On Birchwood Lane." I put down my pen. "I know this is out of nowhere," Sandra continued. "But I've been trying to reach you for 6 months. I didn't know how to find you until I saw your name in the Tribune. What is this about?" I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "It's about your mother, Vivian." I said nothing. "She's not well," Sandra said. "She's been in and out of the hospital. She's at Grant Medical Center right now. Room 418. I looked out at the Chicago skyline. "Why are you calling me?" I said quietly. "Because," Sandra said, "she's asking for you." The line was quiet for a moment. Then Sandra added, "And because there's something you need to know. About the night she left you." I sat very still. "Something she never told anyone," Sandra said. "Something I've kept for 24 years. I did not respond. Immediately, I looked at my desk. At the report I had been writing. At the view of the city I had built my life in. "Give me your number," I said. I wrote it down. I did not call her back that night. I sat at my desk for 47 minutes. And I thought about a 7-year-old girl on a porch in the cold, next to a red suitcase, watching a gray Toyota turn left at the end of Birchwood Lane. I thought about what I did not know. About what I had never asked. About what the truth might cost me. And then I thought about Sandra's last words, something she never told anyone. Visual. A woman alone in a lit office high above a dark city. Her hand resting on a phone. The stillness of someone standing at the edge of a door they've been afraid to open for 24 years. Visual. A highway at night. Headlights. The flat landscape of central Illinois becoming Ohio. A rental car. A woman driving south, jaw set, eyes forward. I called Sandra Bauer back the next morning. I told her I needed 2 things before I came to Columbus. I needed her to tell me on the phone right then what she knew. And I needed her to understand that I was coming for the truth, not for a reunion. She said she understood. Then she told me. Visual. A kitchen in a small house. A woman sitting at a table with a cup of coffee, speaking into a phone. Outside the window, a gray autumn morning. Renee Holloway, my mother, had not left me because she was selfish. She had left me because she was afraid. Afraid of a man named Carl Weston. Carl Weston had been my mother's boyfriend from 1992 to 1994. He was 38 years old when I was 7. He was a drinker. He had a history of violence. He had been arrested twice in Franklin County. Once for assault in March 1993, once for destruction of property in January 1994. My mother had been trying to leave him since 1993. She had tried twice. He had found her both times. The third time in October 1994 she had a plan. A specific, quietly constructed, terrifying plan. She was going to go somewhere he couldn't find her. She had arranged a room with a woman she worked with at the copy shop on North High Street. She had saved $1,300 in cash. She was going to go. But she couldn't take me with her. Not because she didn't want to, but because she believed, genuinely, terrifyingly believed, that if she took me and Carl found us he would hurt me. She had seen what he did to things he could not control. She had made a decision in the desperate, cornered logic of a woman running from violence, that the safest place for her child was as far from her as possible. So she called Patricia. She put me on the porch. He drove away. Visual. A woman's hands folded on a table. Old grief, not fresh. The weight of something carried too long. Sandra had known all of this because Renee had come back to Birchwood Lane briefly in December 1994. She had knocked on Sandra's door in the middle of the night, thin and trembling, and asking Sandra not to tell anyone where she was. She had asked about me. Sandra told her Patricia had taken me. My mother had exhaled in a way Sandra said she would never forget. Like 20 years of air coming out of her. She left again 2 days later. Sandra had not heard from her for years after that. I sat with this information for a very long time. I want to be honest with you about what I felt because I think it matters. I did not feel relief. Not immediately. I felt something complicated. Something that was part understanding and part fury and part grief for a version of the story I had never been given. I had spent 24 years carrying the clean, comprehensible story of a mother who left. That story had weight, but it had shape. It fit inside my chest. This new story was harder. It had no clean edges. Because here is the thing, I understood why she ran. I did not understand why, in 24 years, she had never found a way to reach me. She had not been in danger forever. Carl Weston was arrested again in 1997 for assault and served 4 years in Chillicothe Correctional Institution. He was released in 2001. He died in 2009. She had had years. She'd had decades. And she had never called. Till now. When she needed something. And this was the question that kept me awake on the drive to Columbus. Until now, when she was perhaps finally afraid of something else. Something like running out of time. Visual, a hospital at night. Illuminated cross on a building. Emergency lights. The antiseptic smell of a place that waits for people to decide things. Grant Medical Center. Columbus, Ohio. October 19, 2018. I parked in Lot C. I sat in the car for 11 minutes. Then I went inside. Visual, a hospital corridor. Fluorescent lights. The sound of monitors. A nurse station. Room 418. The nurse at the 4th floor station told me the patient in 418 was awake. I knocked. A voice said, "Come in." Visual, a hospital room. Low light. A window with city darkness beyond it. A woman in a bed smaller than she should be. She looked like her photograph. Older, obviously, 53 years old, more gray than brown in her hair, thinner than the woman laughing at my 5th birthday party. But the eyes were the same. The shape of them. The particular darkness of them. She saw me come through the door and she went absolutely still. I stood at the foot of the bed. We looked at each other for a moment that had the weight of 31 years in it. "Vivian," she said. Not a question. Not a greeting exactly. Just, my name. Like confirmation. Like she had been saying it in her head for so long that saying it out loud felt different than she expected. "Hello, Renee," I said. She flinched slightly at the name. I had said it on purpose. "You look so much like her," she said. "Like Mom." I did not respond to that. "Sandra told you," she said. "Yes." She nodded slowly. She looked at her hands. "I know it doesn't explain everything." "It doesn't explain 24 years, I said. She looked up. She didn't try to argue. "No." He said. "It doesn't." The room was quiet for a moment. The monitor beeped steadily. Somewhere in the hallway a cart rolled past. "Why now?" I said. "Because I'm sick," she said simply. "Congestive heart failure. Stage 3. They're talking about a procedure." "I know what congestive heart failure is." He studied me. "Of course you do." Another silence. "What do you want from me, Renee?" I said. Kept my voice level. I had practiced that. I had driven 4 hours and I had thought about what I would say, and I had decided that I would not perform emotion in either direction. I would not perform forgiveness and I would not perform cruelty. I would ask clear questions and wait for clear answers. "I don't want anything," she said quietly. "I wanted to see you. Before," she stopped. "Before you run out of time," I said. She nodded. I looked at her. Then I pulled the chair from the corner of the room and sat down. Not next to her. A few feet back. Far enough to be clear about where I stood. "Talk," I said. Visual. 2 women in a hospital room. One in a bed. One in a chair. Years of distance between them. The room holding the silence while they begin the hardest conversation of both of their lives. We talked for 2 hours and 17 minutes. He told me about Carl. About the years after. About moving to Cincinnati in 1995. About working as a medical billing clerk for 12 years. About marrying a man named Dennis Bauer in 2003, Sandra's brother, which was why Sandra had the connection, why Sandra had seen the Tribune article, why Sandra had called. About divorcing Dennis in 2011. About asking Sandra to find me in 2017. About how Sandra had spent 6 months tracking down an address before finding my name in print. I listened. I did not fill her silences. I let her carry the weight of them herself. At one point she said, "I thought about you every day." I said, "I believe you." She stopped. Her voice caught. She pressed her fingers against her eyes. "I know I'm sorry is not enough." "It's not," I said. She looked at me. "But it's a start," I added. I want to be very precise about why I said that. Not because I was ready to forgive her. Not because what she did was acceptable. But because I had spent 31 years without a mother and I was sitting 3 feet from one and she was 62 years old and sick, and some part of me, some exhausted, stubborn, honest part of me, was not willing to let her die thinking I had not heard her. I heard her. That was all it meant at that point. I heard her. I did not stay the night. I drove back to Chicago that evening. I called Patricia from the car. "How was it?" Patricia asked. I thought for a moment. "It was a start," I said. Patricia was quiet. Then, "Good." Visual. A car on a nighttime highway. Tail lights. A long road stretching out ahead. A woman driving into the dark, alone but not lost. Visual. A modest house in the Columbus suburbs. Midday. A woman walking up a driveway. A door opening before she knocks. After the hospital, I found out something else. Sandra had mentioned it almost as an afterthought at the end of our phone call. She said, "There's one more thing you should probably know. About your Aunt Karen. Karen Holloway. My mother's younger sister. I had a vague memory of her from childhood. She had visited Birchwood Lane once, maybe twice. She was younger than Renee by 6 years. She had brown hair and a loud laugh. What about Karen?" I said. Sandra paused. "She lives in Westerville now. Has for years. 2 kids, a husband. Nice house." "Hey," I said. "She knew you existed," Sandra said carefully. "She knew where you were living with your Aunt Patricia. She knew your grandmother left you money. She's known all of it." I said nothing. "She never reached out," Sandra said. "Not to Patricia. Not to you." I absorbed this. "Was she close to Renee?" I asked. "They talk every week," Sandra said. "Have for years." I sat with this. My mother's sister, my aunt, had known where I was for 2 decades. She had had Patricia's phone number, theoretically, through family connections. She had had 24 years. And she had built her nice house in Westerville and raised her 2 children and had said nothing. Not because she was afraid. Not because she was running from anything. But because acknowledging me would have made things complicated. Visual. A street in Westerville, Ohio. Clean driveways. Bicycles in front yards. The comfortable quiet of a neighborhood that doesn't have room for complicated things. I drove to Westerville 3 days after the hospital visit. I found the house on Maple Ridge Court. I knocked on the door. A woman answered. Mid-40s. Brown hair. The loud laugh compressed now into a careful smile that dropped the moment she recognized me. She went pale. "Vivian," she said. "Hello, Karen," I said. She stepped back slightly. Her hand tightened on the door. "I don't," she started. "I wasn't expecting." "I know," I said. "May I come in?" She hesitated. Then she stepped aside. Visual. A suburban kitchen. Too clean. The kind of clean that feels like control. 2 women sitting across from each other at a granite island. Karen offered me coffee. I declined. We sat at her kitchen island for 40 minutes. I was not unkind. But I was direct. I told her what I knew. That she had known about me. That she had never reached out. That I was not there for an apology. I was there for information. Specifically, had she known before the trust matured that my grandmother had left me money? She looked at her coffee cup. "Renee told me," she said quietly. "After she came back to Columbus in 2001. And you never thought to, it wasn't my," she stopped herself. Chose different words. "I didn't know how to approach it. It had been so long. I didn't know how you'd react." "You didn't know how I'd react," I repeated. She looked up. I looked back at her steadily. "No," I said finally. "You didn't reach out because it was easier not to. I understand that. I'm not here to punish you for it." She visibly exhaled. "But I want you to understand something, Karen," I said. "You had a niece. You have a niece. And for 24 years, you chose convenience over that. I'm not telling you that so you feel guilty. I'm telling you so that the next time you make that kind of choice, about your kids, about anyone, you know the full cost of it." She was quiet. I stood up. "I hope your family is well," I said. I left. I drove back to Chicago. I did not hear from Karen again for 5 years. But that is not the end of her part in this story. Visual. A modern Chicago office. 23rd floor. A team of people around a conference table. A woman at the head of it. Window behind her showing Lake Michigan in winter light. I want to tell you about what I built. Not to impress you. But because I think it matters. The way you build something when you have no family money, no safety net, no one to call if it falls apart. The way you build it when the only thing underneath you is what you made yourself. Between 2012 and 2021, Holloway and Associates grew from 2 people in a 600-square-foot office on South High Street to a 41-person firm headquartered in Chicago with satellite offices in Columbus and Cincinnati. By 2019, annual revenue was $23 million. By 2021, It was $38 million. By 2023 it was $47 million and I was on the Forbes list, and I received an invitation to speak at the Illinois Business Leadership Awards Gala in March 2024. I want to tell you what that growth felt like from the inside. It felt like controlled fear. Every single year. The kind of fear that doesn't paralyze you, it clarifies you. It burns away everything that doesn't matter and leaves only the question, what do you do next? I did not have investors with deep pockets who would cover a bad year. I did not have a family business to inherit or a network of prep school connections. I had Theodore Graves' voice in my head telling me I had a mind for business. I had Patricia Reed's 2 words, I knew it, framed somewhere inside me like a fact. I had my grandmother's $341,000, which I had invested in the company at its founding and used as the seed for every client relationship after that. And I had the red suitcase. So, I know how that sounds. A grown woman, CEO of a $47 million company, keeping a child's broken zippered suitcase in the bottom of her home office closet in Lincoln Park. But I never threw it away. I don't know that I could have. It was the thing I carried out of Birchwood Lane. It was the weight of what I started with. Keeping it felt like keeping myself honest. Visual, a closet. The bottom shelf. A red suitcase, worn at the edges, safety pin on one side. Old masking tape with a name on it. A hand resting briefly on the handle then letting go. In January 2022, I established the Eleanor Holloway Foundation. Named for my grandmother. The foundation provides mentorship and scholarship funding to children in foster care and group homes across Illinois and Ohio. In 2022, we funded 43 scholarships. In 2023, 67. We held our first annual gala in November 2023 at the Hotel Allegro in Chicago. Patricia and Gerald came. Marcus came. Theodore Graves came, still wearing one of his 3 ties, and stood in the corner looking pleased in the way that only teachers look when they watch something they started become something they never imagined. I stood at the podium of that gala and said, my grandmother never met most of you. She was a woman in Columbus, Ohio, who loved a child she was afraid she might not be able to protect. She left what she had in an envelope and trusted someone else to carry it. This foundation is the answer to that trust. The room was full. I did not see a single person I shared blood with. That was okay. I had learned a long time ago that family is not only blood. Family is the people who make pancakes when you arrive on their doorstep with a suitcase. Family is the teacher who stays after class. Family is the woman who says I knew it and means it from the beginning. If the woman who raised you wasn't the woman who gave birth to you, if you know what it means to find your family instead of being born into it, type the word found in the comments right now. I want to see your names. And if no one has told you lately, the people who chose you, they made the right choice. Subscribe to Orphan Origins. Because we are almost to the part of this story that changed everything. Visual, a formal envelope on a desk. Ivory paper. Gold embossing. The kind of envelope that announces something important. The invitation arrived on January 15, 2024. Courier delivered. To my office on the 23rd floor of the Burnham Building. Illinois Business Leadership Awards Gala. Grand Meridian Ballroom. Ashford Tower Hotel, Chicago. Saturday, March 9, 2024. Vivian Claire Holloway, keynote speaker. I had known this was coming for 3 months. I had accepted the invitation in October 2023. But seeing it formally printed on ivory paper with gold embossing made something settle in me. Something quiet and solid. Like a fact becoming real. I set the invitation on my desk. I went back to work. 3 days later, my assistant Priya knocked on my office door and leaned in with the careful expression she uses when she has information she's not sure how to deliver. I got a call this morning, she said. From a woman named Karen Holloway. I looked up. She said she's your aunt, Priya continued. She saw the announcement about the gala in the Tribune. I was quiet for a moment. She's requesting 2 tickets, Priya said. I studied my desk for a beat. Did she say anything else? I said. She said, and I'm quoting because I thought it was odd, she said, tell Vivian I'd like to show her that things have changed. I thought about that for a full minute. 5 years since the kitchen in Westerville. 5 years of silence. And now, the moment my name appeared in print alongside an event at the Ashford Tower, she wanted tickets. How many people are on the guest list? I said. 412 currently, Priya said. Give her 1 ticket, I said. 1. Priya nodded. And Priya, I added. Don't send it to her directly. Send it to the address she calls from. She'll understand. Priya nodded again and left. I sat for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone and called Renee. Visual. A phone against a cheek. A window. Lake Michigan in January. Cold and gray and very still. Renee and I had a relationship by 2024. It was not uncomplicated, and it was not what I imagined a mother-daughter relationship should look like because I had stopped imagining that a long time ago. But it was real. We spoke on the phone twice a month. She had had the heart procedure in 2019, a mitral valve repair at Grant Medical Center, and she was stable now, fragile in the particular way of people who have been seriously ill and emerged changed by it. She worked part-time at a pharmacy counter in Columbus. She lived in a small apartment in German Village. I had met Dennis, her ex-husband, once and found him inoffensive. I had not yet told her about the gala. Karen called my office, I said when she picked up. Pause. For the gala? Yes. I didn't tell her to, Renee said quickly. I know, I said. She saw the Tribune. A longer silence. She's trying, Vivian, Renee said carefully. Trying is good, I said. But trying after 5 years of silence. The timing is not lost on me, Renee. She was quiet again. Are you coming? I said. To the gala. Another pause. Longer than the others. The kind of pause that contains an entire internal argument. I don't know if I belong there, she said quietly. I had thought about this. I had thought about it for weeks. You belong wherever I say you belong, I said. And I'm telling you that if you want to come, there is a seat. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then, okay. There's one condition, I said. What? You come as my mother, I said. Not as a woman who is trying to make things right. As my mother. Because that is what you are. Even if neither of us has quite figured out what that means yet. The line was quiet. Okay, she said again. Softer this time. Table 9, I said. There'll be a card with your name. I hung up. I sat for a long time. Then I called Patricia. I told her what I had done. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You're a bigger person than I was at 36. I learned from you, I said. She laughed. Quietly. The way she always laughed, not big, just real. Table 7, I said. Front section. Best view of the podium. We'll be there, she said. Visual. The Ashford Tower Hotel, Chicago. Exterior. Night. March 9, 2024. Ballots. Black cars. Women in evening gowns. Men in tuxedos. The city glittering around it like something that knows an important thing is about to happen inside. I arrived at the Ashford Tower at 6:47 p.m. 40 minutes before the event began. I arrived early because I needed to walk the room before it was full. I needed to know where everyone was going to be. This was not anxiety. This was preparation. Patricia had taught me that control is not about dominance. It is about knowing the landscape before you move across it. The Grand Meridian Ballroom was on the 14th floor. 412 seats. 12 round tables of 10 flanking a runway of space that led to the main stage. Table 1, the presenting sponsors. The partners of the Illinois Business Leadership Committee. The oldest money in the room. Table 7. Patricia Reed, Gerald Reed, Marcus Reed, Theodore Graves, and 6 seats for people who had been part of my journey. Clients who had become friends, colleagues who had become something like family. Table 9, Renee Holloway. Dennis Bauer. Sandra Bauer. 3 empty seats beside them. And somewhere in the general seating, Karen Holloway. The event coordinator, a young woman named Jessie, met me at the ballroom entrance with a clipboard and a warm, professional smile. Ms. Holloway, you look incredible. I was wearing a deep charcoal sheath dress. Simple. Clean lines. A single strand of pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. I had found them in the trust documents, listed among her personal effects that Robert Harlan had held all these years. I had picked them up from his office 6 months earlier. I wore them for her. Visual. A woman's hand touching a pearl necklace at her collarbone. A quiet gesture, private in a crowded room. Guests began arriving at 7:15. I stood near the entrance for 20 minutes, greeting people I knew, accepting congratulations about the Forbes feature, deflecting questions about the year's revenue with careful politeness. And then at 7:34 p.m. I saw Karen. She came in wearing a black dress that was slightly too formal for the event. The kind of overdressing that announces effort. She was with a man I did not recognize. Her husband, presumably. She scanned the room. She saw me. She crossed toward me with a smile that was part warmth and part guilt and part calculation in the precise proportion that I recognized from the kitchen in Westerville. "Vivian," she said. "You look stunning." "Karen," I said. "I'm glad you could make it." He looked around, taking in the room. The scale of it. The names on the program she was holding. "This is extraordinary," she said. "It's an important evening," I said simply. Her husband extended a hand. "Tom Holloway. Karen's told me so much about you." "I'm sure she has," I said pleasantly. I excused myself a moment later. At 7:41 p.m. I saw Renee. She came in through the main entrance in a slate gray dress that I did not recognize. She had clearly bought something new for tonight. She looked older than the last time I had seen her, which was Christmas 2023, in her apartment in German Village. She stood straight. She held herself differently than the woman I had first seen in a hospital bed in 2018. She saw me immediately. We walked toward each other. She stopped 2 feet away. She looked at me the way you look at something you almost lost forever and have been trying to figure out how to hold ever since. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. She noticed the pearls. Her eyes went directly to them. "Are those," she started. "Grandma Eleanor's," I said. She pressed her lips together. Looked down for a moment. Then she looked up and said, "She would have loved you." "She did love me," I said quietly. "She just never got to show me." Renee nodded. I gestured toward table 9. "Go sit down," I said. "I'll find you after." She nodded again. She touched my hand once, very briefly, and then moved through the room. At 7:58 p.m., with 2 minutes to the program beginning, I was standing near the stage entrance when I felt the shift in the room. A particular kind of stillness. I turned. Karen Holloway was standing at table 9. She had found her seat, somewhere in the general section, but she had walked toward table 9. She was looking at the place cards. She had found Renee's name. She had turned the card over to see the table number, probably checking against the seating chart on the program. Then she looked up. And she saw Renee. Renee was already sitting. She looked up and saw Karen. The two sisters looked at each other across the table. I watched from 30 feet away. I did not move. What happened between them in that moment was not my business. That was their story to figure out. I had given Renee a seat. I had given Karen a ticket. What they did with proximity was theirs to navigate. The event coordinator touched my elbow. "Miss Holloway, 2 minutes." I turned from the room. I walked to the stage entrance. I stood in the dark just off the wings. I could hear the MC beginning his introduction. Our keynote speaker tonight needs very little introduction. In 12 years she has built one of the Midwest's most respected independent consulting firms from a 2-room office on South High Street in Columbus, Ohio to a 41-person operation generating $47 million annually. She is a Forbes honoree, a Chicago Business Leader of the Year finalist, and the founder of the Eleanor Holloway Foundation, which has provided scholarships to over 110 children in foster care across Illinois and Ohio. Please welcome to the stage, Vivian Claire Holloway. 412 people applauded. I walked into the light. Visual, a stage. Spotlights. A woman stepping forward from the dark into light. The room rising to greet her. The banner behind her. Illinois Business Leadership Awards. Her name large in the program every person in that room is holding. Visual, a podium. A microphone. A woman standing before 400 people in a hotel ballroom. Her face composed. Her posture straight. The room very quiet. I stood at the podium for a moment before I spoke. Not from nerves. I had not been nervous at a podium in 10 years. I stood there because I wanted to look at the room. All of it. Table 7, where Patricia and Gerald and Marcus and Theodore Graves were sitting in their good clothes, looking at me with the particular expressions of people who have always known this moment was coming. Table 9, where Renee sat very still, her hands folded on the white linen, watching me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not quite proud. More like awe. The awe of someone watching a consequence of something they did, and finding it larger than they expected. And Karen, 3 tables back, holding the program in her hands, reading the cover. I looked at the room. Then I began. Visual, her face at the podium. Steady. Controlled. The face of someone who has been preparing for this their whole life. I want to start tonight with a question. How many of you built something from nothing? Not from nothing in the metaphorical sense. I know most of you in this room are accomplished people. I mean from actual nothing. From a 2-room apartment. From a part-time job at $17 an hour. From a scholarship application you wrote by hand at a library computer because you did not have one at home. How many of you can tell me what it sounds like inside a house when the person who was supposed to stay leaves? Because I can. I was 7 years old. And I remember exactly what silence sounds like when it means something permanent. I did not grow up with business mentors in the family. I did not have a network of connections or a trust fund from parents. What I had was a woman named Patricia Reed, who found a child on a porch in Columbus, Ohio in October 1994 and said, "You're coming home with me." What I had was a teacher named Theodore Graves, who told a 15-year-old with no family money and no roadmap that she had a mind for business, and who meant it. And what I had was a grandmother I never knew well enough, named Eleanor Holloway, who loved a child she was afraid might be lost, and who left an envelope. This award tonight is not mine alone. It belongs to the people who made the decision to show up. Who made the decision to stay. Who made the decision, when it would have been easier not to see me. The Eleanor Holloway Foundation exists because I believe that every child in a group home, every child aged out of the foster care system, every 7-year-old sitting on a porch with a suitcase deserves one person who says, "You're coming home with me." You don't have to be family to be that person. You just have to choose to show up. The room was quiet. Then it erupted. 412 people standing. I stepped back slightly from the microphone. I let it happen. I looked at table 7. Patricia was standing. She was not clapping. She was standing very still with both hands pressed against her chest and her eyes very bright. Gerald was clapping. Slowly, firmly. The way Gerald Reed did everything with certainty. Marcus had his hands up, grinning. Theodore Graves was standing and he was clapping and he was nodding in a very small specific way that I recognized. It was the nod he had given me when I'd shown him the error in his pricing model. The nod that meant, yes, exactly. This is what I knew. I looked at table 9. Renee was standing. She was not clapping. She was looking at me with her hands pressed to her mouth and her eyes full of something that had nowhere to go. And I thought of a woman in a gray Toyota, turning left at the end of Birchwood Lane, and the child at the window who watched her go. And I thought about all the years between that window and this podium. And I felt, not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But something that had the same direction. Something that was moving toward the light. I looked at Karen. She was sitting. She had put the program face down on the table. Her husband was standing and clapping, looking around, absorbed in the crowd's energy. Karen was not looking at the crowd. She was looking at me. And in her face, for the first time since Westerville, I saw something unguarded. Something that did not have calculation in it. She looked like a woman watching a consequence she had not chosen to be part of, understanding the full shape of what she had missed. I held her gaze for one moment. Then I stepped back to the microphone for the closing of my remarks. Build something real, I said. Build it from wherever you started. And when you get to the part where it matters, show up for someone who needs you to. That is the only kind of legacy worth leaving. The room stood again. Visual, a ballroom. 400 people on their feet. The banners. The lights. And at the podium, a woman who was once a child on a porch with a suitcase, standing at the center of everything she made. Visual, a hotel ballroom after an event. Tables clearing. Glasses half full. A woman by a window high above the city speaking quietly with someone. After the speech, the room moved in the particular way of gala crowds. Fluid, warm, self-congratulatory in a way that I found neither offensive nor interesting. People came to shake my hand. To hand me business cards. To tell me about children they had or mentors they remembered, or their own version of a starting from nothing story. I listened to all of them. I shook all the hands. And then I found table 7. Gerald shook my hand with both of his. Well done, he said. Exactly as he would say it. 3 syllables. Complete. Marcus grabbed me in a bear hug that nearly knocked my champagne glass sideways. You referenced the red suitcase, he said. Without calling it the red suitcase. You noticed, I said. I've been watching this story my whole life, he said. Of course I noticed. Theodore Graves came to me last of that group. He was 75 years old now. Retired from Dayton Jefferson 12 years ago. He was still wearing one of the 3 ties, the blue one with a narrow stripe. He had dressed up for this. He took my hand in both of his and held it for a moment. I told you, he said. You did, I said. I hope some child in a group home somewhere hears what you said tonight and decides that the gas station on Route 35 is not the destination. I looked at him. I told you about that? I said. He smiled. 6th grade. December 1999. You came to tell me about it. You didn't look angry. You looked decided. I had not remembered telling him. But I had been decided. Thank you, I said. For everything. He waved it off in the modest way of people who know their contribution was significant. Visual. An older man and a woman. A quiet moment in a crowded room. The particular quality of a teacher who did their job right watching the result. Renee found me near the entrance at 10:45. The room was thinning out. She came toward me carefully, like she was not sure of the distance she was allowed. I did not close it completely. But I did not step back. Your grandmother's pearls, she said. Where did Robert Harlan had them? I said. They were listed in the trust documents. I picked them up last fall. She nodded slowly. She would have wanted you to have them, she said. I know, I said. Pause. Your speech, she started. You don't have to say anything about it, Renee. I want to. I waited. I spent 30 years, she said, convincing myself that leaving you was the bravest thing I did. That it was for you. That it was protection. She stopped. Hearing you tonight, she stopped again. What? I said quietly. I understood that the bravest thing I ever did, she said, was calling Sandra and asking her to find you. Even if I didn't deserve to. She looked at me. I looked back. You don't have to deserve to want your child, I said. You just have to want them. She pressed her lips together. I always wanted you, she said. I know, I said. That's what makes it so complicated. She nodded. She had no answer to that. There wasn't one. We stood for a moment in the clearing ballroom. Then I said, I'm having dinner at Patricia's in Dayton next month. First Sunday in April. She looked at me. If you want to come, I said, you can. She didn't move for a moment. Patricia would be, I've already asked her, I said. She said yes. Renee's face did something complicated. Surprise, gratitude, and grief in very close proximity. The way those things tend to live in people who have waited a long time for something they weren't sure they still had the right to want. Okay, she said. April 6th, I said. 2 p.m. I'll text you the address. I walked her to the elevator. I did not hug her. Not yet. But I stood there until the elevator doors closed. Visual. Elevator doors closing. Woman's reflection in their surface watching them shut. Then turning back to the room. Karen. She found me outside the elevator bank at 11:15, when most of the guests had gone and the staff were folding the last of the linen. She was alone. Her husband had gotten a car. She looked tired in the way of people who have carried something heavy for a long time and have finally stopped moving long enough to feel the weight of it. I owe you an apology, she said. Yes, I said simply. She flinched slightly. I don't have a good reason, she said. I had every reason to reach out and I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my place. But the truth is, she stopped. The truth is I was afraid. Of what? I said. Of what you'd think of us, she said. Of the whole family. Of how bad it would look. I looked at her. It looked exactly as bad as it was, Karen, I said. Afraid or not. She nodded. I know. A silence. What do you want? I said. She looked at me. I'd like a chance to be in your life. If you'd allow it. I thought about this. That's not something I give out all at once, I said. That's something you earn in small increments over time. By showing up. By staying. I understand, she said. Good, I said. Then we'll see. I shook her hand. She looked at it for a moment, the formality of it, and then she shook it. I watched her walk to the elevator. Then I went back into the emptying ballroom to say goodnight to Priya and collect my things. The banner was still up. Illinois Business Leadership Awards. My name on the program face up on an empty table. I picked up one copy, folded it, put it in my clutch. I didn't know exactly why I kept it. Maybe because some part of me still felt like the child at the window, still wanting some form of record that said, I was here. I became something. It happened. This was the record. I turned off my table lamp. And I walked out of the Grand Meridian Ballroom. Visual. A sunny apartment in Lincoln Park. Sunday morning. Coffee. Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows. A quiet that is full, not empty. It has been 7 months since the gala. I want to tell you where things are now. Holloway & Associates received the most significant client acquisition in our history in April 2024. A 2-year strategic consulting engagement with a Fortune 500 manufacturing company based in Indianapolis. Contract value, $8.2 million. We are hiring. The Eleanor Holloway Foundation announced its largest grant cycle in October 2024, 89 scholarships, totaling $1.4 million across Illinois and Ohio. I spoke at the dedication of a new youth resource center in Dayton in September 2024. It is named the Patricia Reed Education Hub. Patricia had no idea until the day of the unveiling when her name appeared on the building. She stood in the parking lot in front of it and cried in the way she almost never cried, fully without managing it. Gerald put his arm around her. Marcus stood next to me. You did good, he said. We did good, I said. Visual, a building. A name on the wall. A small group of people standing in morning light looking at it. Renee came to dinner on April 6th. Patricia's house on Maple Creek Road. The same kitchen table. The same garden outside the window. Renee sat across from Patricia for the first time in 30 years and they were quiet for a moment in the way of people who share the same complicated history from opposite sides. Then Patricia said, "Would you like some coffee?" And Renee said, "Yes, please." And that was where it began. Not with forgiveness as a declaration. Not with an apology that covers everything. Just, "Would you like some coffee?" Yes, please. Two women who both loved the same child figuring out how to share the space of that. It is not finished. It may never be finished. Healing is not a destination. It is a practice. Like making the bed every morning. Like writing things down. Like showing up. We are practicing. Visual, a kitchen. Afternoon light. A table. Multiple generations of women sitting around it. Coffee cups. Something that is not simple but is real. Karen and I have spoken 4 times since the gala. Once on the phone. 3 times for lunch, twice in Chicago, once in Columbus when I was visiting Renee. She is cautious. I am careful. We are learning the distance. I do not know what we will become to each other. But she has a daughter named Lily who is 14. Lily knows she has a cousin she never met. Karen told her after the gala. Lily sent me a message on Instagram. She said, "I saw what you said about building things from nothing. I want to do that someday. Is it okay if I ask you questions sometimes?" I wrote back immediately. "Yes," I said. "Anytime. I mean it. Because Theodore Graves stayed after class for me. And Patricia came when called. And somewhere in the accumulated weight of all those small decisions to show up, that is where I was made. Not in the house on Birchwood Lane. Not in the gray Toyota. Not in the leaving. In the showing up. Visual, a desk. A red suitcase in the background, visible on a shelf. On the desk, a framed letter, the Ohio State acceptance letter. A pearl necklace. A program from the Illinois Business Leadership Awards Gala. And in the center, a child's birthday card, slightly faded, with a strip of masking tape on the front that reads, in a woman's handwriting, Vivian. I still have the red suitcase. I keep it on the bottom shelf of the closet in my home office. The safety pin is still holding the zipper. The masking tape is still there. My name in my mother's handwriting. I don't keep it because I need the evidence. I keep it because it is the most honest record of where I started. And every morning when I walk past it on my way to the desk I think, you made it a long way from that porch. You made it a long way. Visual. Slow pull back from a lit apartment window. The city of Chicago below. A woman at her desk still. The lake in the distance. Early morning light beginning. My mother gave me away to strangers. And the stranger she chose became my real family. I spent a long time being angry about the first part of that sentence. Now I spend most of my time being grateful for the second part. That is not a resolution. That is not a bow on a box. Life does not work that way, and I have no interest in pretending it does. What I have is this. I am 36 years old. I have a company I built from a 2-room office and a grandmother's trust fund. I have a foundation that sends children in group homes to college. I have a woman in Dayton, Ohio who found me on a porch in 1994 and never stopped showing up, and whose name is now on a building. I have a relationship with my mother that is real and difficult and honest. I have a suitcase that is 30 years old and I will never throw it away. And I have this. The knowledge that family is not only the people who were supposed to stay. It is the people who choose to. Visual: a desk. A woman writing. Outside Chicago. Morning. If you were raised by someone who wasn't obligated to raise you, if you know what it means to be chosen by a person who had every reason not to choose you, you know something that people who grew up inside perfect families do not always know. You know that love is a decision. It is not a given. It is a daily, difficult, deliberate choice. And the people who made that choice for you, whoever they are, teacher, aunt, neighbor, stranger, foster parent, coach, social worker, they made you possible. Tell them. If you can. Tell them today. And if you're sitting somewhere right now carrying a story like this, if you have a suitcase that you've never thrown away literally or in some other way, I want you to know something. The suitcase is not a weight. It is a record. And you get to decide what you build with what's in it. You always did. They left you behind. But they could not take away who you were going to become. Visual. Final image. A red suitcase, a pair of pearl earrings, a letter, a name on a building. A slow montage of the small objects that hold a life together. This has been Orphan Origins. If this story stayed with you, if it hit something real, please like this video. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything to a channel like ours. Subscribe to Orphan Origins. We tell these stories every week. Stories of abandoned children, chosen families, silent rises, and the moments when the world finally sees who you became. You belong here. Drop your story in the comments. Even one line. Where you started. Who showed up for you. What you built. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is hand them a story that says, what happened to you was not the end of you. Every orphan has an origin.